The desert stretched endlessly beneath a white-hot sun that seemed to drain the life from everything it touched. Jesse James rode alone, his horse's hooves cracking against sun-baked earth that hadn't seen rain in months. The landscape was unforgiving. Jagged red rocks jutted from the ground like broken teeth, and the air shimmered with heat that made distant mesas appear to float above the horizon. Jesse pulled his hat lower over his eyes, squinting against the glare. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, pushing west through Arizona territory to avoid a posse that had picked up his trail near the New Mexico border. His saddlebags were light, too light. A few strips of dried beef, half a canteen of water, and a handful of bullets. Not enough to last more than another day or two out here. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the rhythmic creak of leather and the occasional snort from his exhausted mount. Then he saw it. A dark shape sprawled across the trail ahead, motionless in the beating sun. At first, Jesse thought it was a dead animal, maybe a horse or a mule. But as he drew closer, his hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip. The shape was too large, too strangely positioned. It was a man. Jesse reined his horse to a stop 20 feet away, his eyes scanning the surrounding rocks for any sign of ambush. Out here, nothing was ever what it seemed. A body could be bait, a trap laid by outlaws, bandits, or worse. But there was no movement, no sound. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hand on his gun, and approached on foot. The man lay face down in the dirt, one arm stretched out, as if reaching for something that wasn't there. His clothing was torn and blood-stained. Buckskin leggings, a faded shirt, and a single feather tied into long black hair that hung loose across his shoulders. An Apache. Jesse stopped, his jaw tightening. Relations between whites and Apaches in this territory were murderous at best. The wars had been brutal, leaving scars on both sides that would never heal. Most white men wouldn't stop for a wounded Apache. They'd ride past, or worse, put a bullet in him to make sure he stayed down. But Jesse wasn't most men. He crouched beside the warrior, scanning for weapons. A knife lay half buried in the sand near his outstretched hand, but it was out of reach. The man's breathing was shallow, rattling in his chest like stones in a leather bag. Blood had pooled beneath him, dark and thick, soaking into the thirsty ground. Jesse rolled him over carefully. The Apache was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad as a plow horse. His face was lined with years of sun and wind, streaked with dirt and dried blood. A deep gash ran across his ribs, still seeping red. Another wound punctured his thigh, likely from a rifle shot. The man's eyes fluttered open, dark, unfocused, but still alive. For a moment, they stared at each other. Jesse saw no fear in those eyes, no pleading, just a quiet acceptance of death, as if the warrior had already made his peace with it. Jesse sat back on his heels, exhaling slowly. He should leave. He should mount his horse and ride away before whoever did this came back to finish the job. Getting involved with Apache business was suicide. The tribes didn't forgive. They didn't forget. And they sure as hell didn't trust white men. But something held him there. Maybe it was the way the man's hand had been reaching forward, even in his dying moments, still fighting, still trying. Maybe it was because Jesse himself had been left for dead more times than he could count, and someone had always stopped. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he was just tired of all the killing. Jesse pulled a canteen from his belt, uncorked it, and lifted the Apache's head gently. The man's lips were cracked and white, his tongue swollen. Jesse tilted the canteen, letting a thin stream of water trickle into his mouth. The warrior coughed, choking on it at first, but then he swallowed. His throat worked painfully, his eyes closed again, but his breathing steadied. Just a fraction. Jesse gave him more. Slow, careful. He didn't have much water left, but he gave it anyway. When the canteen was nearly empty, Jesse set it aside and tore a strip of fabric from his own shirt. He pressed it against the wound on the man's ribs, binding it as tightly as he could. It wouldn't save him, not out here, not without real help, but it might buy him a few more hours. The Apache's eyes opened again. This time they focused. He stared at Jesse with intensity that made the outlaw's skin prickle. The warrior's lips moved, forming words in a language Jesse didn't understand. His voice was barely a whisper, rough as gravel. Jesse shook his head. "Don't know what you're saying, friend. But you hold on, you hear? Don't quit yet." The Apache's hand moved, slow, trembling, and gripped Jesse's wrist. His fingers were like iron, even in his weakened state. He spoke again, the same words, more urgent this time. Then his hand fell away, and his eyes closed. Jesse waited, watching the rise and fall of the man's chest. Still breathing. Barely. He stood, wiping the blood from his hands onto his pants. The sun was starting to dip toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. He couldn't stay here. If whoever ambushed this man came back, Jesse would be next. But he also couldn't leave him to die alone. Jesse scanned the rocks again, his instincts screaming at him to move. Finally, he grabbed the Apache's knife from the sand and placed it in the man's hand, closing his fingers around the hilt. If he woke, he'd have a weapon. If he didn't, well, it was better than nothing. Jesse mounted his horse and rode a short distance away, finding a cluster of rocks that offered some cover. He unsaddled, spread his bedroll, and settled in to wait. He didn't know why. He didn't know this man anything. But he stayed. As night fell and the stars emerged like scattered diamonds across the black sky, Jesse sat with his back against the rock, his rifle across his knees, watching the distant shape of the dying Apache warrior. And somewhere far beyond the darkness, drums began to beat. Jesse woke to the sound of thunder. His eyes snapped open, his hand already reaching for the rifle beside him. The sky above was still dark, stars fading into the pale gray of early dawn. But the sound wasn't thunder. It was deeper, more rhythmic. It rolled across the desert like a drumbeat, growing louder with every passing second. Hooves. Hundreds of them. Jesse scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the edge of the rocks, peering out into the half-light. At first, he saw nothing but shadows and dust. Then the horizon began to move. Riders. They came from the east, silhouetted against the rising sun, a solid wall of horses, and men stretching across the width of the valley. Jesse counted 20, then 50. Then he stopped counting. There were too many. Apache warriors. They rode in silence, their horses moving as one, their faces painted for war. Feathers adorned their hair, and rifles glinted in the dawn light. They weren't charging. They were advancing, slow and deliberate, like a storm rolling in from the mountains. Jesse's mouth went dry. His hand tightened on the rifle, but he didn't raise it. Shooting would be suicide. Even if he hit a few, the rest would swarm him in seconds. He was a dead man. The riders reached the spot where Jesse had left the wounded warrior. They stopped. No commands were given. No shouts. They simply halted, their horses stamping and snorting in the dust. A single rider dismounted, a tall man with gray streaking his long black hair. He wore a beaded vest and carried himself with the authority of someone who had led men into battle more times than Jesse could imagine. The elder knelt beside the wounded giant, placing a hand on his chest. The warrior was still alive. The elder's head turned slowly, scanning the rocks. His eyes found Jesse immediately, as if he'd known exactly where to look. Jesse froze. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then the elder stood and raised one hand, palm forward. A gesture Jesse didn't fully understand, but one that didn't feel like a threat. Not yet. Anyway, the elder spoke, his voice carrying across the distance. The language was sharp and flowing, incomprehensible to Jesse, but the tone was clear. "Come out." Jesse hesitated. Every instinct told him to run, to mount his horse and ride hard for the nearest settlement. But he'd be dead before he made it 10 yards. So he stepped out from the rocks, rifle lowered but still in his hands. He walked slowly toward the mass of warriors, his boots crunching in the gravel. 100 eyes watched him. 100 hands rested on weapons. When Jesse reached the elder, he stopped. The old man's face was lined and weathered, his eyes sharp as obsidian. He looked Jesse up and down, then gestured to the wounded warrior on the ground. "You," the elder said in halting English. "You give water." It wasn't a question. Jesse nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did." The elder stared at him for a long moment, then turned and spoke rapidly to the warriors behind him. Several dismounted and moved to the giant's side, lifting him carefully onto a travois hitched behind one of the horses. The wounded man groaned but didn't wake. The elder turned back to Jesse. "You white man. Outlaw." Jesse's jaw tightened. "That's right. Why you help?" Jesse didn't have a good answer. He glanced at the warriors surrounding him. Young men with hard faces, old men with scars, boys barely old enough to ride, all of them waiting. Didn't seem right to leave him, Jesse said finally. The elder's expression didn't change. "Many white men leave. Many kill. I'm not many white men." The elder studied him, then nodded slowly. He spoke again in Apache, and several warriors moved forward. Jesse tensed, but they didn't draw weapons. Instead, they gestured for him to follow. "You come," the elder said. "Chief wants to see you." Jesse's stomach dropped. "You're a chief?" "Yes." "You give water to his son." Jesse glanced at the massive warrior being loaded onto the travois. "Son of a chief." "Of course." He looked back at the elder. "And if I say no?" The old man's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "You die here." Jesse let out a slow breath, then nodded. "Guess I'm coming then." They brought his horse, already saddled. Jesse mounted, and the warriors closed in around him, not hostile, but watchful. The elder climbed onto his own horse and raised his hand. The entire group turned as one and began to ride. Jesse rode in the center of the formation, surrounded by Apache warriors on all sides. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the cool morning air. No one spoke. The only sounds were the steady rhythm of hooves and the occasional creak of leather. After an hour, they entered a canyon, narrow and winding, with walls of red stone rising high on either side. Jesse had heard stories about places like this, places where entire armies had vanished without a trace. The canyon opened into a hidden valley, and Jesse's breath caught. A village, dozens of wickiups, traditional Apache dwellings made of brush and hide, clustered near a stream that cut through the center of the valley. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children ran between the structures, laughing. Women looked up from their work, their expressions shifting from curiosity to suspicion as they saw the white man riding among the warriors. The group stopped at the largest wickiup. The elder dismounted and gestured for Jesse to do the same. Jesse slid from his saddle, his hand never far from his revolver. The elder ducked inside the wickiup, and Jesse followed. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the dim interior. A fire burned low in the center, smoke curling upward through a hole in the roof. An old man sat cross-legged on the far side of the fire, ancient, his face a map of deep lines and shadows. But his eyes were bright, burning with intelligence. The chief. The elder spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing to Jesse. The chief listened, his gaze never leaving Jesse's face. When the elder finished, the chief spoke. His voice was soft, but it filled the space like distant thunder. The elder translated. "He say you give water to dying man. Sacred water. Life water." Jesse nodded. "I did." "He say you not know who this man is. Not know he is chief's son. Not know tribe watch from hills." Jesse's blood ran cold. They'd been watching. "He say you stop anyway. You give water when no white man would. When many white men would kill instead." The chief spoke again, and the elder's expression softened slightly. He say, "You save his son's life. This is debt. Sacred debt." Jesse swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for a reward." "No reward," the elder said. "Debt. You understand? Apache not forget. When life is given, life is owed." The chief rose slowly to his feet and approached Jesse. He placed one weathered hand on Jesse's shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. He spoke again long, measured words. The elder translated. "You are guest now, not enemy. You eat with us. Sleep safe. When you leave as brother." Jesse stared at the chief, then at the elder. "And your son, he live," the elder said, "because you give water." The chief released Jesse's shoulder and returned to his place by the fire. He gestured to a spot across from him. Jesse sat. And for the first time in years, the outlaw Jesse James sat in peace among men who had every reason to kill him, but didn't. Jesse spent 3 days in the Apache camp, and every hour felt like walking a tightrope strung across a canyon. He was treated well, fed, given water, allowed to rest in the shade of a wickiup near the edge of the village. But he was never alone. Warriors watched him constantly, their expressions unreadable. Children peeked at him from behind their mothers, whispering. The women kept their distance, their eyes sharp with distrust. Jesse didn't blame them. He knew what his people had done. He'd seen the burned villages, the broken treaties, the bodies left to rot in the sun. The Apaches had every reason to hate him. The fact that they hadn't killed him yet was a miracle or a test. On the second night, the chief's son woke. Jesse heard the commotion from across the camp, voices rising, footsteps hurrying toward the largest wickiup. He stood, uncertain whether he should approach or stay back. But the elder appeared at his side, gesturing for him to follow. Inside the wickiup, the giant warrior lay on a bed of furs, his chest wrapped in fresh bandages. His eyes were open, clear now, though his face was still pale. The chief sat beside him, one hand resting on his son's shoulder. When Jesse entered, the son's gaze locked onto him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the warrior's lips moved. He spoke in Apache, slow, deliberate words. The chief listened, then nodded. The elder translated. He say he remember you. Remember water. Remember your face when you thought he would die. Jesse shifted uncomfortably. I'm glad he made it. The warrior spoke again, his voice stronger now. The elder's expression grew serious. He say you are not like other white men. He say he saw your eyes. You have killed. You have suffered. But you have not lost honor. The word hung in the air like smoke. The chief spoke, and the elder continued translating. He say his son asked question. Why you help? You not know him. You not know us. You risk your life to give water to enemy. Why? Jesse looked at the giant warrior, then at the chief. He thought about lying, about giving some noble answer that would make him sound better than he was. But something in the chief's eyes told him that lies wouldn't work here. I don't know, Jesse said quietly. I've done a lot of bad things in my life. Killed men who probably didn't deserve it. Stolen from folks who couldn't afford to lose it. Maybe I just wanted to do one thing that didn't add to the weight. The elder translated. The chief and his son exchanged a long look. Then the son nodded slowly, as if satisfied. The chief stood and gestured for Jesse to follow him outside. They walked through the camp, past fires where families gathered, past children playing with wooden horses, past old men smoking and talking in low voices. The chief led Jesse to the edge of the valley, where the stream tumbled over smooth rocks and disappeared into the desert beyond. The chief sat on a flat stone, and Jesse joined him. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of the water was soothing, almost hypnotic. Finally, the chief spoke. The elder, who had followed at a distance, translated. He say you think this is end of story. You think you give water. We say, thank you, you leave, but it not so simple. Jesse frowned. What do you mean? Apache believe all things connected. When you give water to dying man, you make connection. You tie your fate to his. To us, this is sacred law, older than mountains, older than white men. Jesse's unease deepened. I don't understand. You save life. Now life is owed, not just by my son, by all tribe, by ancestors, by blood. I didn't ask for anything, Jesse said. No, but debt still exists. The chief turned to look at him. You're hunted, yes? White men chase you, want to kill you. Jesse's jaw tightened. How'd you know that? We know many things. We watch. We listen. You are outlaw, Jesse James. Hearing his name spoken aloud in this place sent a chill down Jesse's spine. If you know who I am, then you know I'm dangerous to have around. Yes, but you also guess now. Brother. Apache protect brother. I don't need protection. The chief's expression didn't change. You will? Jesse stood, frustration boiling over. Look, I appreciate what you're doing, but I can't stay here. I got people after me, lawmen, bounty hunters, worse. I bring trouble wherever I go. I won't put your people at risk. The chief rose as well, meeting Jesse's eyes. You not understand. Debt is sacred. If you leave now unpaid, it follow you. Follow my son. Follow all of us. Balance must be restored. Then what do you want from me? Jesse demanded. The chief was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and the elder translated carefully. White men come. Soldiers. They take Apache land. Kill our people. Burn our homes. We fight, but we are few now. Scattered. Broken. The chief's voice grew heavy. 3 days ago, soldiers take my daughter. My son try to save her. They shoot him. Leave him to die. Take her away. Jesse felt his stomach drop. Where'd they take her? Fort. 2 days' ride south. She is prisoner now. They use her to make us surrender. To make us leave our land forever. And you want me to get her back? The chief nodded slowly. You owe life. This is how debt is paid. You bring my daughter home. Then balance is restored. Then you are free. Jesse stared at him, his mind racing. Breaking into a U.S. Army fort was suicide, even for him. But he looked at the chief's face, at the grief and determination etched into every line, and he knew there was no other answer. If I do this, Jesse said slowly, and I get her out, we're square. No more debts. No more sacred laws. I walk away and nobody follows. The chief extended his hand. Yes. Jesse took it. The chief's grip was iron. Then I'll get her back, Jesse said. Or die trying. The chief nodded. You not die. Apache spirits watch you now. Jesse wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. But either way, he was committed. The fort sat in a shallow valley, surrounded by wooden palisades and watched over by guard towers at each corner. Jesse lay flat on a ridge half a mile away, studying it through a battered spyglass he'd borrowed from the Apache elder. Soldiers moved in and out of gates, maybe 50 men, all armed, all trained. Smoke rose from cook fires inside the walls. Horses stood in a corral near the barracks, and somewhere inside, the chief's daughter was being held prisoner. Jesse lowered the spyglass, his jaw tight. This was madness. He was one man. He didn't have an army. He didn't even have a solid plan, but he'd given his word. He spent 2 days watching the fort, learning its rhythms, the guard rotations, the supply wagons that came and went, the weak points in the walls. He mapped it all out in his mind, the way he used to map bank vaults and train schedules. On the third night, he moved. He waited until the moon was down, the sky black as pitch. He wore dark clothing, his face smeared with dirt to kill any shine. His revolver was loaded, but he'd left his rifle behind, too bulky for what he had planned. Jesse approached from the west, where the terrain was roughest and the guards least attentive. He moved slowly, every step deliberate, every sound measured. He'd done this before, slipped past sentries, avoided patrols, but never with this much at stake. He reached the base of the palisade and pressed himself against the rough wood, listening. Footsteps above, a guard on the wall, walking his circuit. Jesse waited, counting the seconds. When the footsteps faded, he moved. He found a spot where the logs were slightly warped, leaving gaps wide enough to wedge his fingers and boots into. He climbed, inch by agonizing inch, his muscles screaming. When he reached the top, he peered over carefully. The guard was 20 feet away, facing the other direction. Jesse pulled himself over the wall and dropped silently to the ground inside. He crouched in the shadows, his heart pounding, and waited for the alarm. Nothing. He moved through the fort like a ghost, keeping to the darkest corners, avoiding the pools of torchlight. He passed barracks where soldiers snored. He slipped past the officers' quarters, where lamplight still glowed in the windows. He worked his way toward the center of the fort, where a small stone building stood apart from the rest. The guardhouse. 2 soldiers stood outside the door, rifles in hand, talking in low voices. Jesse couldn't get past them without being seen. He needed a distraction. He scanned the area and spotted the stables. He circled around, staying low, and slipped inside. The horses stirred, sensing him, but he moved among them calmly, whispering. He found a lamp hanging near the door, lifted it carefully, and smashed it against a hay bale stacked in the corner. Fire spread fast. Jesse was already gone by the time the first shouts went up. He heard the guards of the guardhouse running toward the stables, yelling for water. He sprinted across the open ground and slammed his shoulder into the guardhouse door. It held. Jesse cursed, pulled his revolver, and shot the lock. The door swung open. Inside, a single cell. And in the cell, a young woman, maybe 20, with long black hair and eyes that blazed with defiance even in the dim light. She wore a torn dress, her wrists bound with rope. "You the chief's daughter?" Jesse asked, already working on a lock. She stared at him, then nodded. "Then let's go." He shot the cell lock, yanked the door open, and cut her bonds with his knife. She rubbed her wrists, watching him warily. "Who are you?" "Someone who owes your family a debt. Now move." They ran. Behind them, the fire was spreading, soldiers scrambling to contain it. Jesse led her toward the west wall, retracing his path. They were almost there when a shout went up. Prisoners escaped. Gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into the wood around them. Jesse shoved the girl ahead of him, returning fire with his revolver. He hit one soldier, then another, but more were coming. They reached the wall. Jesse boosted her up, and she climbed fast, faster than he had. She dropped over the other side, and Jesse followed, bullets whizzing past his head. They hit the ground running. Jesse grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the rocks where he'd left his horse. Shouts echoed behind them. Torches flared. They reached the horse, and Jesse swung into the saddle, pulling her up behind him. He kicked hard, and the horse bolted into the darkness. They rode through the night, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. Jesse didn't stop until the sun began to rise, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. He reined the horse to a stop near a rocky outcrop and dismounted. The chief's daughter slid down, breathing hard, her eyes fierce. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you do this?" Jesse looked at her. "Your father saved my life. Figured I owed him. You are the one who gave my brother water." "Yeah." She stepped closer, studying his face. "You are outlaw. Killer. Why do you care about honor?" Jesse didn't have a good answer. He looked out at the endless desert, the sun climbing higher. "Maybe I'm tired of being just an outlaw," he said quietly. She nodded slowly, then placed her hand on his arm. "You are brother now. To all of us." Jesse didn't know what to say to that. They rode back to the valley together. When they arrived, the tribe was waiting, warriors, women, children, all gathered near the stream. The chief stood at the front, his son beside him, still weak but standing. When the chief saw his daughter, his face broke into an expression Jesse had never seen before. Relief, joy, grief released. The daughter ran to him, and they embraced. The chief looked over her shoulder at Jesse, his eyes shining. He spoke, and the elder translated. "Debt is paid. Balance is restored. You are free." Jesse nodded, suddenly exhausted. "Then I'll be on my way." But the chief raised his hand. "Wait." He walked to Jesse and placed both hands on his shoulders. He spoke long and slow, and the elder translated every word. "You came as stranger. You leave as brother. Apache not forget. If you ever need us, you call. We will come." Jesse swallowed hard. "I appreciate that." The chief smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Go in peace, Jesse James. Your path is long, but you walk it with honor now." Jesse mounted his horse. The entire tribe watched him ride away, silent and solemn. When he reached the edge of the valley, he turned back one last time. They were still standing there, 100 souls watching him go. And for the first time in his life, Jesse James felt like he'd done something that mattered, something worth remembering. He turned his horse toward the horizon and rode into the rising sun.